Hey everyone, welcome back to The Stylish Bride, the podcast dedicated to making sure you are dressed, styled, and down the aisle. I'm your host, Julie Sabatino, and today we are going to be talking about something that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is wedding day dressing. And we have a wedding day dressing service as part of The Stylish Bride, but there are lots of people out there around the country who also do it. And I think that a lot of brides don't even really know what it's for, what we do, and whether or not it would be helpful for them. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to really tell you guys in depth, what the deal is and why this is something that could be helpful to you on your wedding day. And regardless of whether or not you hire us, I think that it's really necessary for weddings of a certain level and a certain complexity especially. So we'll get into who it's for a little bit later, but I think that I should start out by telling you a little bit of background about our service. As most of you guys know, I launched The Stylish Bride in 2004 because I knew there was a need in the marketplace for non-biased advice in finding a wedding dress. And, that's in response to my own difficulty finding mine when I was married in 2001. And then I went to work for a bridal designer after fashion school. I went back. I left Wall Street, went back to fashion school, then went to work for a bridal designer. And at the time, there really wasn't a whole lot of information out there unless you had a friend who had already been married or, I guess you really just scoured the bridal magazines. That's kind of all there was. So I thought, gosh, I can help these ladies and really help them get what they need. And then, fast forward 15 years, my service today is really narrowing down the information because there's so much out there today. And so through that progression of the last 15 years, I found a lot of the brides that I styled wanted me on site to make sure that it all came together perfectly. We worked for a year most of the time on putting together the whole fashion story, everything from the wedding dress and bridesmaids dresses to moms and after party outfits and all of it, the stuff that I typically do with my styling clients. But then, on that day, they wanted to make sure that they had the coverage that they needed to make sure it came together perfectly. But I found that after a while, I was getting requests from brides that I hadn't styled, and it sort of surprised me. I knew a lot of wedding planners, and they would say, hey, can you come and help my bride over here? Or it was a friend of a friend's bride, whatever. And I started to realize that there was a need for something more, something on the wedding day itself to really make sure that things looked the way that you planned for them to look. So in 2012, in response to all of that, I started our wedding day service officially and hired stylists that I trained to do things the way that I knew they needed to be done. And as you guys know, I'm all about empowering women and giving a luxurious, wonderful experience to make sure that you have the best day that you possibly can. And I really wanted to carry that through. It was sort of like the execution behind the styling. And whether or not I styled you, there was a lot of effort was going into these fashion pieces that really are different than handling anything else that you've ever done. So I knew that there was a need in the marketplace for this kind of service. And so I officially launched it in 2012. And interestingly, it has grown exponentially since then. And we're fortunate to call the best of the best in the industry our partners, everyone from Raffinelli Events to Marcy Bloom to Colin Cowie and Lynn Easton and many, many, many others bring us on site for most, if not all of their weddings. And typically, they are the ones that suggest it to their clients, which isn't what I expected. I thought that brides would kind of know about it, but what I realized is that they don't because they've never been married before. And unless they have a sister that's gotten married, they don't understand what that actual day is going to be like. So since launching it in 2012, we have grown to be in 3 U.S. cities, New York, Boston, and Chicago, and also have a post in the UK, in London and Dublin, actually, that services all of our European weddings, because I feel like Europe is the new Caribbean, and all destination weddings are happening over there now, and you wouldn't believe the number of brides that I have getting married in Italy and France and even England. So we've put a team over there to make it much more convenient. And I'm really excited to announce, you guys are going to have to tune in next week because I'm going to be announcing our 4th US city next week. And I'm very, very excited about it. It's something I've been working on for a long time. So I think that it's going to be really good. But kind of in preparation for that, I thought, I really need to tell people what we do because I get a lot of questions about it. Brides don't really know. And just so you guys know, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about all of the different fashion emergencies that can happen. But definitely go back and listen to episode 6 to learn in depth what to do when your wedding dress is wrinkled. And then check out episode 8 for what to do when your bustle breaks. And unfortunately, that's a really, really typical thing. But instead of going into the nitty-gritty of the emergencies that can happen, I'm going to talk to you about why the service is valuable and what we do to prevent them from happening in the first place. And by the way, I think that that's why a lot of wedding planners are the ones that recommend us and even hire us. It's because they understand the importance of the service and why it's very specialized and it's not something that they or their team does. And also because they've seen these fashion emergencies happen and know what a deal breaker it is when something happens to a wedding dress that can't be fixed and how it can really ruin a bride's day. And no one wants that to happen. So I think that whether it's our service or one of the other professionals out there in this country, the number one and most important thing that we do is really taking care of the bride and the wedding dress. And the reason that this is important is because wedding dresses are a really delicate garment. I mean, not only are they typically white or ivory or even the palest of pinks, which, attract every piece of dirt that you can ever imagine, but they shouldn't be handled by just anyone. The fabrics are delicate. They require special knowledge of how to treat them. And it really shouldn't be done by your mom, your bridesmaid, your wedding planner, because you kind of need to know what to do. So when you have a dress that, of a certain level, you're going to want to hire a professional to treat it. I went into that a lot in episode 6 when we were talking about what to do when your dress is wrinkled. But anyway, I think that, I look at this service in some ways as an insurance policy. And, I said it a little bit before, but you've spent a year, thousands of dollars perfecting this look. And it's the most important look of your life, only because of all of the photos that you're going to look back on in this dress. And, of course, you're making the most solemn commitment that you'll be making for your life. But, you want that to look great. And if you have gone through all of that and the fittings and the trying on and all of it, don't you want to know that it's going to be perfect on that day? And how do you know? I mean, it's kind of a crapshoot. Things happen. And at every single wedding we do, fashion emergencies happen. So having somebody there on that day that can really troubleshoot those for you, prevent them from happening in the first place, and keeping you calm is a really, really important thing. I call our stylists ladies in waiting because not only do they handle the garment expertly with white gloves and lots of training, they also are experts at keeping brides calm. So I want to give you an example of a worst case scenario that happened to a wedding planner friend of mine who called me from the West Coast, and we're very friendly. And it was the wedding day of one of her clients. And she said to me, oh my God, the bride's wedding dress shrank. The person treating it and steaming it out didn't know how to do it properly. The fabric shouldn't have been steamed. And now it's 3 inches shorter and she's freaking out. I'm like, oh my God, what are we going to do? So I helped her. Obviously it is not a great situation, but things like that illustrate the point of how important it is to have somebody there that knows what they're doing, because things can happen. There are fabrics that shouldn't be steamed. There are fabrics that should be pressed instead. There are things that shouldn't be touched at all. And when you do touch them, it has to be very, very light. So anyway, I know another wedding planner who had the zipper of a dress completely bust open the minute that she sat down to dinner. And this was a very expensive custom dress, and there was no one there to fix it. So she had to change out of her dress into her after-party dress way before she had planned on it. And thank God she had to change because, that would have been a disaster. But she wasn't happy. So first and foremost, the dresser is there to take care of the bride and the wedding dress. And after that, the level of service that the person in your city or, whomever it is that you're thinking of hiring provides is very, very variable. For our service, we look at it very much like a luxury service. And my stylists have been trained by me to do it the way that I want it done. And I admit that I'm a complete and total perfectionist and that it's important to me how everything looks. So they wear beautiful uniforms and they wear white gloves to handle all of the fashion and to make sure that nothing gets on the dress. But, we go above and beyond in terms of styling. I've taught them to work directly with the photographers because they are taking pictures of the dress on the hanger in a beautiful area that they're moving it to. And by the way, the photographers absolutely hate handling the wedding dress because it's so anxiety provoking that they love when the stylists are there and they can take care of it for them. So that, if they're putting it in a window to get a beautiful shot, my girls are wiping the whole thing down. I mean, I've done it myself where I'm on my hands and knees making sure there's nothing on the floor, and the floor is clean so it's not getting dirty. And, same thing with accessories. They're styling the shoes and the jewelry and the veil and all of that. So we help them set all of that up and provide a beautiful vignette while maintaining, the garments themselves. So that's one thing. Then, of course, dressing the bride and helping her get in because, I don't know if you guys probably haven't heard this if you're a bride or an engaged woman, but unless your dress is sitting on you in the right way, it can sometimes not zip up. And so, I've seen it in a fitting where the dress is sitting a little bit low and all of a sudden it almost seems like it's too tight because the zipper can't go up because it's not sitting at the right spot. So things like that, we're very, very used to dealing with and can make sure that that doesn't happen. I think one of the most important things that we do is, I call it shadowing the bride during the photos. And this is really critical to make sure that the bride doesn't get dirty. And everybody wants outside photos, no matter when and where you get married, just because they're so beautiful. But you really take a risk in getting your dress dirty. And it's kind of important to have somebody there looking out for you and making sure that it's not dragging in any spots and that you're not walking down the aisle with a filthy train. So, my girls carry tarps with them so that if the ground is a little wet, you can put it down and out of sight so that, the train doesn't get dirty and things like that. So that's really, I think, a very important piece of it. We prepare you before going down the aisle, meaning that, make sure if you have to go to the bathroom, we help you. If you need touch-ups, I've had brides even get out of their dress and put their robe back on while they're getting their hair and makeup touched up, especially if they have a little bit of time. So, sometimes we redress you and do all of that. Then we give everybody a once-over when they're lined up right before they go down the aisle and make sure that everyone's bridesmaid's dress looks good and that the bow ties are straight and pocket squares are showing and all of that. And send you down the aisle, prepare you, lift and fluff your train and send you down the aisle. And then afterwards, after the ceremony, we pick you back up and typically take you to a room where you're going to have hair and makeup again, and then we bustle the train. And this is a really interesting thing that brides that have not yet been married may not know about, but your bustle on your wedding dress can get a little bit complicated. They are definitely not the easiest things to navigate, even when you've stood in the fitting and watched them, if you don't have the training on what to see and if you haven't had the experience of doing a ton of them. So we can really expedite the bustle and make sure that it doesn't take too long and also secure it. There's a lot of times that we see the bustle and at this point in the night, it's dragging 2 inches on the floor. And we know from experience that that's going to get stepped on and pulled out and ripped. So we will sew it up into a different spot just to make sure that it's secure and it's lifted off the floor. So little things like that I think are really helpful. For our service, and I'm not exactly sure about other services out there, we can also have the capacity to help the moms, the bridesmaids, and the groomsmen. And this is funny because a lot of times the bride will say to me, why do I need that? I have, 10 bridesmaids, but they'll be fine. It's not a big deal. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you have no idea. I have seen bridesmaids pull up to the wedding with their bridesmaid dress crumpled at the bottom of the bag with shoes and makeup bags and everything loaded on top of it. And it's a wrinkled mess. Same thing with tuxedos. I mean, these guys get them shipped in if they're rented or they travel with them and they're a mess. So just think about it. You can't necessarily count on the people in your wedding to be fully prepared. So, this stuff comes out in your pictures. Why go through all of this and have wrinkled bridesmaids dresses walking down the aisle? It kills me when I see this in pictures. But another important part of what we do, and I believe most dressers out there, are seamstresses. And so we are there to fix all of the fashion emergencies that happen. And I can tell you very definitively that something happens at every single wedding we've done. And it might not be, a disaster, but, somebody's strap breaks, a stain gets over here, a bridesmaid forgot to get their dress hemmed. Things happen that can really derail your day and add a lot of stress. And so we are there to make sure that that's not the case. If you look on our Instagram, I have pictures of my girls sewing things. One time I had a bride whose the entire hem of the dress got caught in her shoe and it completely came out and we had to sew it up real quick before going down the aisle. We've had groomsmen who's just never got their pants hemmed and we have to do a quick hem before they can walk. So, there's definitely things that happen. And the last thing that I want to stress, as I said a little bit before, is that my stylists are really, really service-oriented, and I call them need anticipators. And this is like my favorite term because if you guys saw the manual that I have for them, like in the job description and all of our policies, like in bright, bright red, there's something that says never, ever, ever say no. And I believe that, nothing makes me more angry than when someone says no to me because I just think it's unacceptable. Like in customer service, you just don't do that. But I want them to not only not say no, but I want them to anticipate what you need and provide a solution for you. Even things that you don't know are going to come up. And I'll give you an example. I've trained them so that when you're finally dressed and ready to go off and take your pictures, they always carry a bottle of water and a straw for the bride. And she may not even realize that she's going to get thirsty, but I guarantee you she is. And she's not going to want to drink out of the water bottle because it's going to mess up her lipstick. So we have a straw right there and the water ready for her when she gets thirsty. It's little details like that that I really want to provide a level of luxury for them and caretaking on that day so that they feel really great and can enjoy their party. So I guess at this point, I want to talk about who this service is for because, we do get questions like, I don't know if I need this. It seems like kind of a lot of money. Is this really necessary? I think it'll be fine. And I admit and fully acknowledge that this service is not for everybody. And if you're having a low-key wedding and you're a super relaxed person, I don't think you need this. But I will tell you who I think it can be helpful for. I think that if you have purchased an expensive wedding dress that will need special care and handling, it's a really, really good idea, particularly if you happen to be traveling with that dress. And if you think about it, you either have to take it on a plane or it's been shipped and boxed and, all of this stuff. To really make sure that it looks great that day, it's going to need some handling. So I always say have a professional touch it whenever possible. And at the same token, if you have a dress that is easily wrinkleable, so a fabric like an organza or a file, you're going to want to make sure that it's looking good on the wedding day. And sometimes that can be achieved by just hanging it and letting it kind of air out. And sometimes you're going to need a little more love. So again, I think that that's a time that it's important to have a professional. I think that if you have a really long train on your dress and know that you want to take photos outside, it's also really useful. Like I was telling you before about them carrying the train and teaching you how to carry it yourself so that we're not in your photos and like keeping an eye on it and making sure that it's not dragging is a really critical piece if you want to make sure that you're not dirty when you're going down the aisle. I think that it's also if you need a level of security. So I'm a person who I'm sure you've heard on this podcast before is like, I'm a worrier. I think of like worst case scenario and then put in, plans A, B, C, and D to prevent it from happening. And that's just how I am. So knowing that somebody is there to take care of whatever it is happens is something that would be really comforting to me. In fact, I wish we had had it on my wedding day because tons of things happened. When I was just married, going back down the aisle, the photographer stepped on my train and I heard a giant rip and I was afraid that my entire tush was exposed to the church. Thank God it wasn't, but like it was all messed up. My cousin didn't have her bridesmaid dress hemmed and didn't realize that it's going to be like 6 feet too long on her. And so like my aunt is sewing it in the other room and, like all sorts of things happen that are stressful. And I was already nervous. So I was like, I wish that I had had somebody there that day. I think it's also particularly helpful if you have a really large wedding party because they can become a lot to manage. If you have 10 girls or 8 girls even, there's a lot of people getting ready and things are going to happen for sure. So, with our service, you don't necessarily have to hire somebody to service those girls, but things always, always, always happen. So it's a really good idea. And I think that, the other thing to consider, and I get a lot of calls right before the wedding day for this particular one, it's when the wedding dress has a complicated bustle. And I have been in fittings where there are 5 layers of the bustle, and I'm not even kidding. each one having a different way of tying it up. Sometimes they're ties, sometimes they're buttons, sometimes they're snaps, and it's very intricate and easy to mess up. And I get a call like right after the final fitting, like, oh my God, I'm so stressed out. My mom can't handle the bustle. And, are you free? Can you come help us? So, of course we can if we're available, but I wouldn't recommend waiting to book until that last minute. But, I still regret not having somebody on that day. I've talked about it before with the bustle. I wish that I had had somebody, so my mom wasn't trying to bend over and do it when she should have been enjoying herself. Although I know she didn't mind, but it would have been better. It broke anyway, but that's a whole different story. So, we have lots and lots and lots of testimonials on our site that I encourage you to check out. But I want you to know that the reason that we do what we do is because we love it, and we feel that every bride deserves to feel her best on her wedding day. It's really important, and it's something that we can help you with. Because without that, if you don't feel good, you're not going to have a great time at your wedding. So anyway, as always, thank you for listening. I hope that this overview has been helpful on what is out there for an option for you. And if you have questions about things that I haven't addressed, please reach out. You can find me on Instagram at The Stylish Bride, or email me at julie@thestylishbride, and I would love to chat with you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a tip. And please tune in next week to hear our exciting announcement on the next city that we are unveiling. I'm really, really excited about it, and we're going to have a whole podcast dedicated to it. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from so that you don't miss a tip on how to be dressed, styled, and down the aisle. Bye for now.